Welcome to Reading Renaissance. My name is Thomas. After reading this essay, I decided to change my life, and this is the first thing that I did. This essay is a provocation. It's an incitement. It is not lame. I would say 98% of the things that I've encountered in life that have tried to get me to change my life in some way have been super lame. Advertisements, supplements, total garbage. This is not garbage. This is about weasels. It has blood. It has teeth. It has fight, bite, flight. The world dismantled. It's open to time and death. It goes way down into being, and it does not let go. It's only 15 paragraphs long. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to talk about what it does. It was published in 1983 by Annie Dillard in her book, Teaching a Stone to Talk. This is Living Like Weasels. Let's go. A weasel is wild. Who knows what he thinks? He sleeps in his underground den, his tail draped over his nose. Sometimes he lives in his den for 2 days without leaving. Outside, he stalks rabbits, mice, muskrats, and birds, killing more bodies than he can eat warm, and often dragging the carcasses home. Obedient to instinct, he bites his prey at the neck, either splitting the jugular vein at the throat or crunching the brain at the base of the skull, and he does not let go. One naturalist refused to kill a weasel who was socketed into his hand deeply as a rattlesnake. The man could in no way pry the tiny weasel off, and he had to walk half a mile to water, the weasel dangling from his palm, and soak him off like a stubborn label. And once, says Ernest Thompson Seton, once a man shot an eagle out of the sky. He examined the eagle and found the dry skull of a weasel fixed by the jaws to his throat. The supposition is that the eagle had pounced on the weasel, and the weasel swiveled and bit as instinct taught him, tooth to neck, and nearly won. I would like to have seen that eagle from the air a few weeks or months before he was shot. Was the whole weasel still attached to his feathered throat, a fur pendant? Or did the eagle eat what he could reach, gutting the living weasel with his talons before his breast, bending his beak, cleaning the beautiful airborne bones? I have been thinking about weasels because I saw one last week. I startled a weasel who startled me, and we exchanged a long glance. Near my house in Virginia is a pond, Holland's Creek, with 6 inches of water and 6,000 lily pads. There's a 55-mile-per-hour highway at one end of the pond and a nesting pair of wood ducks at the other. Under every bush is a muskrat hole or a beer can. The far end is an alternating series of fields and woods, threaded everywhere with motorcycle tracks, in whose bare clay wild turtles lay eggs. One evening last week at sunset, I walked to the pond and sat on a downed log near the shore. I was watching the lily pads at my feet tremble and part over the thrusting path of a carp. A yellow warbler appeared to my right and flew behind me. It caught my eye. I swiveled around, and the next instant, inexplicably, I was looking down at a weasel who was looking up at me. Weasel! I had never seen one wild before. He was 10 inches long, thin as a curve, a muscled ribbon, brown as fruitwood, soft-furred, alert. His face was fierce, small, and pointed as a lizard's. He would have made a good arrowhead. This was just a dot of a chin, maybe 2 brown hairs worth, and then the pure white fur began that spread down his underside. He had 2 black eyes I did not see any more than you see a window. The weasel was stunned into stillness as he was emerging from beneath an enormous, shaggy wild rose bush 4 feet away. I was stunned into stillness, twisted backward on the tree trunk, our eyes locked, and someone threw away the key. Our look was as if 2 lovers, or deadly enemies, met unexpectedly in an overgrown path when each had been thinking of something else. A clearing blow to the gut. It was also a bright blow to the brain, or a sudden beating of brains, with all the charge and intimate grate of rubbed balloons. It emptied our lungs. It felled the forest, moved the fields, and drained the pond. The world dismantled and tumbled into that black hole of eyes. If you and I looked at each other that way, our skulls would split and drop to our shoulders. But we don't. We keep our skulls. He disappeared. This was only last week, and already I don't remember what shattered the enchantment. I think I retrieved my brain from the weasel's brain and tried to memorize what I was seeing, and the weasel felt the yank of separation, the careening splashdown into real life, and the urgent current of instinct. He vanished under the wild rose. I waited motionless, my mind suddenly full of data and my spirit with pleadings, but he didn't return. Please don't tell me about approach avoidance conflicts. I tell you, I've been in that weasel's brain for 60 seconds, and he was in mine. Brains are private places, muttering through unique and secret tapes, but the weasel and I both plugged into another tape simultaneously for a sweet and shocking time. Can I help if it was a blank? What goes on in his brain the rest of the time? What does a weasel think about? He won't say. His journal is tracks in clay, a spray of feathers, mouse blood and bone, uncollected, unconnected, loose leaf, and blown. I would like to learn or remember how to live. I come to Holland's Pond not so much to learn how to live as, frankly, to forget about it. That is, I don't think I can learn from a wild animal how to live in particular. Shall I suck warm blood, hold my tail high, walk with my footprints precisely over the prints of my hands? But I might learn something of mindlessness, something of the purity of living in the physical senses and the dignity of living without bias or motive. The weasel lives in necessity, and we live in choice, hating necessity and dying at the last ignobly in its talons. I would like to live as I should, as the weasel lives as he should, and I suspect that, for me, the way is like the weasel's, open to time and death painlessly, noticing everything, remembering nothing, choosing the given with a fierce and pointed will. I missed my chance. I should have gone for the throat. I should have lunged for that streak of white under the weasel's chin and held on through mud and into the wild rose, held on for a drearer life. We could live under the wild rose, wild as weasels, mute and uncomprehending. I could very calmly go wild. I could live 2 days in the den, curled, leaning on mouse fur, sniffing bird bones, blinking, licking, breathing musk, my hair tangled in the roots of grasses. Down is a good place to go, where the mind is single. Down is out of your ever-loving mind and back to your careless senses. I remember muteness as a prolonged and giddy fast, where every moment is a feast of utterance received. Time and events are merely poured unremarked and ingested directly, like blood pulsed into my gut through a jugular vein. Could two live that way? Could two live under the wild rose and explore by the pond so that the smooth mind of each is as everywhere present to the other and as received and as unchallenged as falling snow? We could, we could live any way we want. People take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, even of silence, by choice. The thing is to stalk your calling in a certain skilled and supple way, to locate the most tender and live spot, and plug into that pulse. This is yielding, not fighting. A weasel doesn't attack anything. A weasel lives as he's meant to, yielding at every moment to the perfect freedom of single necessity. I think it would be well and proper and obedient and pure to grasp your one necessity and not let it go, to dangle from it limp wherever it takes you. Then even death, where you're going no matter how you live, cannot you part. Seize it and let it seize you up aloft even, till your eyes burn out and drop. Let your musky flesh fall off in shreds, and let your very bones unhinge and scatter, loosened over fields and woods, lightly, thoughtless, from any height at all, from as high as eagles. So what we have here is an essay. It's a provocation. It's an incitement with blood and teeth and a weasel that does incredible things. Ultimately, where it's taking us to is a place of transformation. And I want to guide you through my understanding of that transformation through these 6 key lines right here and a little bit of interpretation of those lines. So the very first one is the bite, right? The weasel has a bite, but there's a little bit of a paradox in that bite too, because the bite is a bite of obedience. It's not an aggressive bite. It's a powerful bite, and it's a bite that never, ever, ever lets go, but it's obedient to instinct. The weasel does what the weasel does because it's a weasel. Obedient to instinct, he bites his prey at the neck, either splitting the jugular vein at the throat or crunching the brain. And then there's this image of the naturalist who's got the weasel socketed into his hand. You know, a socket is such a perfect, think about a light bulb that's screwed in there. And that's the weasel playing his part, socketed into this hand. And that's the bite. And so whenever you read weasel, read us, because that's part of the transformation. You know, it's about us. It's about especially writers, especially creators, especially people who struggle with that. What am I going to be next? What's the next iteration of me? What's the next version of me as I'm, evolving as a person? Socketed into what? That's the question. So all right, so weasel's going to be socketed into somebody's hands because a weasel bites, and that's what a weasel does. But for us, what are we going to be socketed into? What am I going to be socketed into? Am I going to be socketed into my next video? Am I going to be socketed into the next thing that I care the most about in life, in my creative life? I hope so. Next thing is flight. So we're still thinking about this weasel here. And now the weasel, because the weasel has that bite that never, ever, ever lets go, the weasel has been transformed. Now the weasel is like an eagle. The supposition is that the eagle had pounced on the weasel, and the weasel swiveled and bit as instinct taught him, tooth to neck, and nearly won. And so the weasel is now a weasel eagle thing. And it's flying through the air, stuck onto the body as instinct taught him. So there's our paradox right there, because the weasel can relax into being what it is. Of course, it sticks itself, it sockets itself to that eagle and doesn't care as it's getting its guts ripped out, flying through the air. It's flight. So I think we want that too. Maybe if you make things, you want to take off. You want to go to that next place. So what happens next is that when she is able, her life is moving along. Annie Dillard has this experience where she's moving along and the weasel's moving along, but then something unexpected happens. They do this, and their lives are together for just an instant, and then they cross paths and move on. And this essay is about this instant. And what happens when she tries on that weasel's life for just an instant is the world is dismantled. The world becomes something else. And so that kind of transformation is also, if you have the same inputs and the same outputs and the same inputs and the same outputs, and you have this, where does the transformation come from? What's the basis for everything being very, very, very different if everything is very, very, very the same? So that's a good advertisement for take a trip, go somewhere, get some new clothes, go take a week off from work and look at something differently. Go for a walk. You're not a hiker, take a hike. You've never owned a sports car, take one for a test drive. See what it feels like. Because you have to change your inputs if you're interested in changing your output. And that's what she has here. Her world is different. Moving into number 4, Number 4, we have how the weasel lives and how we live. And so now she's able to see some commonalities. The weasel lives in a necessity, and we live in choice, hating necessity and dying the last ignobly in its talons. So we're trapped by necessity, but the weasel has embraced necessity. I would like to live as I should, as the weasel lives as he should. And I suspect that for me, the way is like the weasel's, open to time and death, painlessly noticing everything, remembering nothing, being alive to the moment. And as a writer, that's, I think that's everything, is being able to notice, having your eyes open and being alert. And being alert means you're open to time. And if you're open to time, that means you're open to death, because that is where time is taking all of us. And so she goes very quickly to some very deep existential places. In 4, open to time and death. And then down, she's thinking about being a weasel. She's thinking about being like pre-linguistic. Down is good, a good place to go where the mind is single. Down is out. I remember muteness. Every moment, time and events are merely poured, unremarked, ingested directly. So this is like being, a place of pure being is a place of security, especially someone who's like, if you could be burdened with like words, overcome with the weight of words and finding the right words, like many creators and writers might be, being able to have the security of a merely sensorial existence for a time could be very, very liberating. And then finally, we return to the weasel's nature, do not let go. And this last powerful paragraph will be the last that we examine. I think it would be well and proper and obedient. So here's this obedience again, obedience to your nature and pure, to grasp your one necessity and not let go, to dangle from it limp wherever it takes you. Then even death, where you're going, no matter how you live, cannot you part. Seize it and let it seize you up, aloft even, till your eyes burn out and drop. Let your musky flesh fall off in shreds, and let your very bones unhinge and scatter, loosened over fields and woods, lightly thoughtless, from any height at all, from as high as eagles. And that's where she leaves us. She leaves us scattered to nowhere, where we started. Do not let go.